always feels so good to me to receive recognition for my work, recognition for the things that I've shared. It means so much to me. It really does. It's almost something that, I don't know, I can't describe it. I think I'm still working on receiving it, because it's like when you've gone so long without that being something that has been acknowledged, within you, it's almost like you question, is it real? And not in terms of imposter syndrome, but it's just more so I thought I was a nobody. I thought what I was saying was just crazy, going in one ear and out the other. I thought what I was saying was meaningless. I was just rambling, I wasn't really that smart, or I wasn't smart, but I was dyslexic, or, something was wrong with me. I was bipolar or something like that. I thought that what I was saying was incorrect or wrong. And my experiences, within academia have been just that. It's been affirming that I'm not that smart, So thank you. Thank you all so much for listening and supporting. Let's go ahead and get into today's episode. That concerns me, or a question that I've been posing rather. And I'm so mad, you guys. I tried to make a YouTube video about this, but for whatever reason, my camera is just wilding out, saying I don't have the footage or the storage or whatever, which is crazy to me because Apple definitely be cleaning my account fully. So that's really bold. Nonetheless, I questioned who should become a Christian influencer. And I want to kind of start off by talking about my journey, my spiritual journey, because man, it's so unique. And I'm so grateful that I had a spiritual practice and a spiritual journey before all of this, what we have today in today's world. And I'm going to talk about the dangers of it. I'm going to talk about what are the side effects, right? What mental health issues and so forth are currently arising because of it. So I'll always be frustrated with Christians who don't advocate, Christians who don't really have a life outside of Christ, right? A life outside of work, Christians who devote their entire lives to faith, and don't really tap into their unique gifts and their unique sense of purpose, right? I was with someone who I was at the park. I was out, and I was walking, and there were 3 white men who approached me. I mean, I say men because they were kind of young, and they all looked the same. It was kind of weird, but they were emotionless, right? What the other 2 were very emotionless. I'm looking at their emotions, and they're just very stark, very blank. And there was one, and he asked me to join their church. And I was like, oh no, okay, well, I'll check it out, check it out online. And I said, okay, thank you for that. And, I was very graceful. I was very gentle. I was very, and I walked away, and he followed me. After a while, I looked up, and he's like, oh, well, can we? And it angered me in that moment. And the person I was with was like, well, why would that anger you? Someone asking you to come to church. It sounds like it's a spiritual attack or something like that. And it angered me because why do you, what is it about you that feels like I need saving, And what angers me is this anti-intellectual approach to that, this intellectualism that is religion, right? You are so persistent in your beliefs and whatever perceptions you have about a person, and you're dead wrong. And you're so incredibly wrong about the person and your perception, but in your mind, you're right. And you're so utterly convinced that it's honestly so profound. No one can get you to get out of this space, right? And I was so angry because I felt like what has been taking place over the course of time, and even in my own life, is this spoon-fed, forceful feeding of religion. And it's frustrating to me because I feel like my boundaries are being crossed. I'm not even I'm joking, but I'm saying this in a joking manner, but I'm saying this in a sense of I feel like my boundaries are being crossed. I feel like who I am as a person is being hijacked, essentially, right? As the world conforms and assimilates, you lose your sense of identity in that. You lose your sense of authenticity in that. And I'm going to try to keep this as organized as possible in thought, in theory, and in observation, because I really don't want to be all over the place with this podcast episode, because it's just a few things I really want to hit on. But my first thing I want to talk about is relationships. No. I'm going to back up. I'm going to talk about my spiritual journey. Then I'm going to talk about how that has impacted my relationships. So, I started my spiritual journey. I was meditating. I remember, I dropped out of college, and I was just confused. I just wanted to know what my purpose was. I wanted to find God. I wanted to find myself, and I remember listening to motivational speakers, right? Really positive motivational speakers. I remember coming across a ministry, and I don't know how I found the ministry, right? It was R.C. Blake's ministry. This was literally 2017, 2018. And learning about men and all of it, it just really renewed my mind, relationally, and how I should see myself as a queen. I mean, he was a pastor who had countless videos online, but full of so much wisdom. And I was very drawn to that. I really felt like that was my spiritual awakening. That was my introduction to Christ, right? I remember I would sit up and listen to his principles. He has this philosophy. It's like queenology, right? And I remember I would literally sit online. I would have a journal where I would sit and I would listen to the things that he would say and how women should, empower themselves and love themselves and all these different things, right? And he would go over scripture. He would use scripture in a way to teach the lessons, and share his wisdom. And I remember for me, I had a Bible. I remember I would sit and I would go to the scriptures and I would highlight it. I would put a little sticky note on it. And I always felt so empowered in my relationship with Christ. I felt like God was for me. I later started meditating as I was listening to Oprah and Eckhart Tolle, and I was listening to, Wayne Dyer, right? Other spiritual teachers. And I never felt like I had to choose between my Bible or my spiritual teachers. I never felt any polarization, right? I never felt like I was in, I was out. I never felt like it was wrong. I never felt like it was something that honestly did not even cross my mind, right? I never felt like it was dichotomous. I never felt like it was contradictory. I later went on to start yoga. Yoga felt so good to my body. I didn't really give it much meaning, didn't really think too much about it. I wasn't trying to conjure up anything. Yoga genuinely just felt good for my body. It was a pretty easy practice to do. I'm very slim. I actually took one of my first yoga classes when I was in college. I was 17. And it was just, when I first started taking yoga at 17, I thought it was funny because I'm like, oh my gosh, here I am, this 17, 18-year-old, and we're in here doing yoga in this gym, that was in this hall that was and I just was like, this is so silly. But I can't say I walked away with a sense of calm, because I don't really think that I had an understanding, it wasn't really that deep to me. It was just something I took as an elective. I was genuinely curious about the practice. And I was like, okay, this sounds like something cool to do, right? I seen white moms do it in movies. And I was like, all right, cool. We're going to do some yoga. But never really thought too much about it. Never really felt like it gave me anything, I just felt like sometimes it made me a little sleepy, but that was it. It was a fairly easy class. You know what I mean? I don't even think I was graded. I think it might've been a satisfactory or something based solely on participation and attendance. And then, fast forward, I'm meditating and I'm continuing my practice in meditation. I eventually become a plant-based pescatarian, vegetarian, and I felt at my spiritual peak. I felt like I was literally walking with God. I mean, meditation would ground me in such a way to where I just didn't really have all this anxiety, right? My mind was very calm. I was very alert. I was vigilant about the things that were going on in my life. I felt very much attuned, and I always had a continuous peace. To me, that was God, right? I would meditate and just literally clear my mind. You know what I mean? Some people talk about the white light that you see during meditation. And maybe I did experience that. Maybe I didn't. I can't really say, because when I was meditating, I didn't really look at it as a practice to get closer to God. I looked at it as a practice to calm my mind, to calm my nerves. You know what I mean? And it was something that I got so much from the practice that I just kept doing it. I felt intuitively, I was very clear. I was very much aware of who I was. I felt like it was a very grounding practice for me. And that was it. Fast forward, I had someone come up in my life who was very religious, and the immediate questions that began to arise for me was, what is it about some people who gravitate towards this hell and all these really, really cruel things in the Bible, when for me, I had been, watching elders, right? R.C. Blake's, right? Spiritual teachers, right? Christian teachers, pastors who were preaching the word of God. But I mean, all the scriptures I had were so loving, right? God is for you. God has plans for you. I mean, just really, really beautiful things. I remember there was a scripture in the Bible, and I think it's in Psalms, and it's like, I will, bless your womb, your husband will be happy. Like, just like, you know what I mean? Like, just really, really beautiful promises of God. You know what I mean? Song of Solomon, right? I am black and beautiful, my love. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't grow up. I didn't have an understanding of this person who was coming into my life so headstrong about God and, his wrath and his punishment. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And I noticed at the time that the people that they were able to indoctrinate were people who had a sense of guilt, right? They were people who were gay. And so for them, they felt the sense of shame, right? We know that the one of the core things, right? The main sins in Christianity is that you cannot be a homosexual. And so I started to tie some things together, and I was noticing things with those who adopted religion versus God's love, right? And I was like, oh, this is based on guilt and shame. And I remember there was a scripture that God had showed me in the Bible, and it was like, basically, just to paraphrase, it was like, don't argue with people who, try to argue about certain convictions and things like that, because they're just riddled with guilt. And it was so crazy because it was like God was speaking to me directly. And I remember having a sense of peace, but because I was so alone in my personal relationship and my spiritual practices, I felt like the religion had really overpowered what I was trying to share with these groups of individuals. And essentially I was outnumbered, right? I didn't really know you know what I mean? I didn't really know whether or not I was doing something wrong. I remember, later hearing things about yoga being satanic and how I'm worshiping all these different things. I remember hearing things about the end of the world and what was taking place at certain conferences in the world and how they were letting out certain things. And it's like, it was so crazy and it was so triggering for me because it really created this sense of paranoia that I think personally sent me into like a psychotic breakdown, because I was already going through so much in my life. But to know that this was because I was worshiping God the wrong way was so heartbreaking and troubling for me. And ever since, I've struggled with believing that God was on my side. I struggled with believing that God was for me. Ever since then, it's like I found myself having a very ambivalent relationship with God. I found myself working my way into salvation. I found myself really giving up, in a lot of ways, like in terms of God, and not necessarily considering like atheism, but, just finding myself just really uncertain about a lot of things, because it was like I never knew that this was, what God wanted for me. And as we move forward today, and what I see today is that everybody's on the same page with God being this very angry God, with the practice of spirituality and Christianity being one of rules and regulations, right? Do's and don'ts. And so when I think about my relationships, I mean, they've been greatly impacted. I mean, I think about me being single for, almost like 4 years, and it's depressing. It's really depressing. And, when you talk to other Christian women who are either married or whatever, you know, they're always telling you, oh, you're just waiting, right? Like God just has you in a waiting season. Like, you know, you're going to get the guy, you know what I mean? And I think about how this mindset sets so many Christians up for failure, because it's like, one, you put so much pressure on marriage. Two, you're also going to put so much pressure on this other person to be your breakthrough and to be the thing that's going to give you a sense of purpose, a sense of self, and a sense of identity. But most importantly, I would say the thing that's most hurtful about it is how religion is so anti-Black. You know, modern religion, Christianity, it's so anti-Black to where it's like, if a guy has dreads, you know, if he wears cut up jeans, you know what I mean? If he wears jeans, if they're like, they could be like a Miris, right? It's like, oh, he's satanic. You know what I mean? When you start really taking a look at the representation and how for Black people, you're really demonized in the faith, right? Who you are is demonized in the faith. And, you know, for me, I started thinking about, you know, and I was like, you know, Christians in their marriages, they struggle with sex and things like that. And it's like, no wonder, right? You are really forced to like marry someone that you're not physically attracted to. And I talked about this idea of the bad boy myth, because to me, it sounds like the bad boy is always the guy who's categorized as the one who may be into fashion, you know? And what does that really mean? Right. And I'm not going to say that, you know, guys who get a lot of attention or don't get a lot, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to say that they're good. I'm not going to say that they're not, you know, whatever the case may be. But it's like, when you really start looking at that and how we classify good and bad, right? It's no different than classifying, you know, white versus Black, right? Like when you start talking about that you know, that system of like racism, right? Which brings me to my next point is like, I am at this point in my life where I'm so fed up with Christians not acknowledging race, not acknowledging racism, not acknowledging injustice, right? You have so many Christians, Black Christians especially, who are deprived, not just of, you know, intelligence, but even just their own personal experiences, right? Their own experiences that would allow them to really grow and become. And I remember when I was listening to R.C. Blake's, one thing I really liked about Blake's was that he spoke about how, you know, faith is a journey, right? It's something that you grow, you get better, right? You're going to make your mistakes. And I'm concerned because I think that what we've done as a society, especially those who are, you know, really inundated with modern Christianity and religion, is that they've justified the social woes and the pitfalls and the illnesses that are persisting within modern society, right? So, you know, it's like coming into Christ and not realizing like, okay, yeah, you still got to work a job. You still have to press forward in your day-to-day life if you want to become something, right? It's like, oh no, I'm just going to go to church. I'm just going to be in this space, right? Only. I think that is something that concerns me. And you know, what comes to mind for me is the movie Acrimony, right? How the wife decides, okay, I don't want to live in this box. I want to get out. I want to try something new. And, you know, she ultimately ends up like falling to peril, right? She's diagnosed with an incurable disease. And that saddens me. You know, that really, really saddens me, because it's like when you think about, for so many Christians, the reward, especially for Black Christians, right? And let me just get back on track, right? This is my biggest thing with modern day religion and Christianity, right? Is the punishment is always on the Black, right? It is the Black person who has to carry the brunt of the sins of everybody, right? You have to be the one to turn the other cheek as a white person abuses you or discriminates against you or commits an act of racism against you, right? You have to be the one to bear the brunt of incarceration, right? Of Black men, of death of Black men, police brutality. You know, you have to be the one to bear the brunt of poverty. You have to be the one you're like, you know what I mean? You have to be the one to carry that. And there's this white girl who has a podcast, and it's like a Christian podcast, and she's got a lot of like appropriation going on. But it's like, it's so crazy because it's like, as I watch her, I'm like, it's crazy how this is like, okay, when she does it. And it's like, oh, I'm just da 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 da. Right. But it's like, if a Black woman was to do that, it would be considered masculine. It would be considered unattractive. And, you know, this is my thing, right? Like, this is my thing. This is the thing that really bothers me, because it's like, when you start talking about Christ and just how white people are justified in everything that they do in regards to Christianity, right? Like it literally, white people are made righteous in Christianity, right? We know that just all the pictures and depictions of white Jesus doesn't really help, but like they're really justified, right? Like I feel like white people don't carry that sense of guilt and shame for just simply existing or even having thoughts. You know how many black people are warring with their thoughts because, you know, maybe they want to play piano, you know what I mean? And maybe they don't want to be in this church community day in and day out, right? Like, and they are dealing with shame and guilt and all these different things, paranoia, right? All these different things because they constantly feel like they're not living right. They're not doing right. They are not enough. Whereas a white person will literally get in faith and be so justified in who they are. And you know what I mean? We'll rewrite the whole Bible for them, right? Like they got like gay churches now, you know what I mean? Like all these different things, like they will literally rewrite the Bible, right? Like mega churches, right? Multi-million-dollar mega churches, you know what I mean? Like don't share the wealth, right? You know, churches don't have to release any public profit, right? They don't have to release their financial documentation to the public. So no one would ever know. But like the Catholic Church, for example, is literally worth like multi-billion dollar. It's a multi-billion dollar industry. They've even got their own bank. You know what I mean? They on top of that, they've got, you know, just a ton of, you know, expensive artwork, right? You look at these freaking like Catherine, you know what I mean? Like you look at the freaking Catholic Church and it's like completely plushed and, you know, Greek art and it's just crazy. It's crazy. And you look at black churches and they're underfunded. You look at black churches and you know what I mean? And so I think for myself, I more so say this as like a plea. I think that this is more so like a wake up call for a lot of Christians, because I just think that where we are right now, especially black people, we're down bad. You know, we're really kind of being lulled to sleep in our faith. And I think a lot of people have been talking about this, you know, but I think I'm more so saying it in a sense of like, I don't even have a solution, to be honest. I think this is just more so like me, I don't know, kind of like shining the light in some of these really dark areas that we have today. But I'm concerned, you know, because I'm realizing that for us, faith is about suffering, whereas for the white person, it's about getting all the blessings, right? You know, here we are at these mega churches. We thinking that we're not praying hard enough. That's why we ain't get, you know what I mean? We don't have multi-million dollars. You know what I mean? We're not faithful enough, you know? And when we see, you know, black mega pastors, a lot of times there is assimilation, right? They come into a white church and then that becomes the thing and the representation. Or, you know, a lot of times it's like, you know, there's only one, you know? And so I think that many are rising. And I also think this too, where like talking about whether or not you should become a Christian influencer, but whether or not you should become a pastor. You know, I think one thing that really gravitated me towards R.C. Blake's was the wisdom, right? Like he was literally wise. You know what I mean? He's like really old. He's old, right? Like, I don't know why young people and even Christian influencers, right? Like, don't get me wrong, right? Because even the Bible says, don't despise, you know, those who are young, or, you know, because people are younger than you, they try to think that they know, you know what I mean? And even for me, like I'm young, you know, I have a little wisdom, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's like, I haven't been alive that long to be out here leading lives. You know what I mean? I'm still trying to figure out my life. And I think that's one thing that I find with so many people, like, especially today, this is nothing more than a cash grab. And that's the thing that's really scary, right? Because anybody could put Christianity on something, and it sells. Like people are running towards it. You know what I mean? Running full, like head in the door. You know what I mean? Just completely blindsided, blinders on. They're going with it. That concerns me. You know, there's someone who, you know, this is like, you know, and we talk about like kind of to spin the block on this, but Christian women in like marriage, right? And just thinking about how, you know, one, you think about there are some women so many from what I found in my own life and even in real time who, you know, will come and preach this supposed gospel, right, of rules and regularities and all these different things you need to do to get your husband, when it's like, one, they just were probably in the right place at the right time, right? Like I said, I talk about geography and how that plays a huge role, right? If you grow up where in the hood where there's poverty, it's not anything that you're doing as a woman, right? Like there's not a lot of opportunities for men to be able to provide for you as a husband. And you know what I mean? Like that's the reason, right? That's, you know what I I mean? Like, that's literally the thing. Like, there's not a lot of opportunities for men to be able to provide for a family. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, one, I'm going to say this before. Well, I would say the second thing is what I was really going to say is, for so many Christian women, I noticed that they don't really have these stories of like these perfect fairy tales that they tell so many other women to wait for, right? These women are a lot of times being abused in their relationships, but they're justifying it, just toxic drama, you know what I mean? So forth, lack of awareness on both parts, right? Both people don't really know how to deal with themselves. Most people probably shouldn't even have been married, but they were so pressed to get married, right? And then, so there's a lot of that there, right? And then I think too, people kind of paint this idea of like a fairy tale. And they make you think that you're going to get with this person, they're going to answer everything. It's just going to be this magical thing. And when you get with this person, you realize like, oh, it's not really, you know what I mean? Where does that leave so many other women, right? It's like you find yourself being disingenuous, I think, like by constantly preaching this idea of like the perfect marriage when you and your partner did not wait. You and your partner have got so much crazy stuff going on. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's just so much to that. And I think that when we talk about Christians, we talk about Black Christians and how people use the faith to really lull themselves to sleep. I think when you spend so much time building a relationship with God, or like trying to find God through religion, you spend so much time in religious practices, you really miss out on the experiences of life that will actually give you the wisdom to be able to discern certain things. You know what I mean? And so I think that it's not a bad thing. I don't think that they're, these women who are in the faith who really preach this perfect Christian marriage are, sinister. I don't think it's solely a cash grab, but I think it's a sense of naivete. I think it's a sense of like, this is kind of like the downfall of doing certain things when you're not ready. This is kind of like the downfall of being someone who wants to be an influencer, who wants, you know what I mean? And you're not ready to build a brand. You're not ready to build a platform yet, right? You don't have the wisdom for that. And that's concerning. And so, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, right? And I've seen Christian women, marry guys who have, 4 kids under the age of like 2. And it's like, wait a minute, what? You know what I mean? Like, and where did you meet this guy? And, this woman has no children, right? And this isn't a matter of like, oh, God can't, or love isn't there. No, this is just a matter of, does that make sense for you? Does that genuinely make sense? And where is the mother of all of these children that you know what I mean? What circumstances would have prevented, what circumstances would have heeded to a man leaving the woman who has bore 4 or 5 kids, you know what I mean, all under the age of 2 to come and marry you? You know what I mean? And I think the thing about religion, and you talk about like anti-intellectualism, it's like, here you are and you're going through all this chaos. You don't realize that this is probably someone who's using you. You don't realize that this doesn't make any sense, but you're so justified in your religion and you're so justified in your faith that you're not even realizing like, girl, you're breaking up a family. You know what I mean? And so that's the thing that concerns me, and I think about even Christian women I've seen who, who've married guys who, all these different things. And it's just like, I'm just saying, this is all I'm saying, because I'm not going to point out men having children prior to their marriage. Like, no, that has nothing to do with anything. I'm more so saying this. I'm saying that it creates this picture perfect ideal. And for so many women who are on the back end, who are single and waiting for this perfect man who just says all the perfect things, or the guy who's in church who really doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, that is that's the thing. That's the thing. And when you talk about religion and how for so many Black people, the requirement is for you to like erase your personality, that's going to make it really challenging for you to partner. And when you consider things like incarceration, when you consider things like, standards, preferences, and most importantly, health and geography, right? Like, we know a lot of people are in ghettos. So, there's not really a lot of opportunity there, right? On top of deprivation. So I just think that one thing I'm noticing is that white people are being justified in these mass movements, right? Of modern religion and mega churches, whereas Black people are being shamed, right? We are being told that we don't pray hard enough. That's why we're poor. We are being told, indirectly, right? Because it's all subconscious, really. And it's like, yeah. So we're being told that we don't pray enough. We're being told that we're sinful. We're being told that we're too confident, that we're too this, we're too, like, overall, that we are too much and that we are doing something wrong. Whereas white people are literally being justified in their very ways of being. And I guarantee you, when this white girl realizes that, okay, I really don't want the Black struggle, right? As most white women do. I realize I don't really want the Black struggle. He's really not rich enough for me to like settle with this, and she gets ready to go off to the Hamptons and put away the Black Act and push that right under the box and put that in the archives. And, it's like, yeah. So I think it's something said about education. And I think it's something said about, and when people talk about reverence in terms of like cultural appropriation, like, yeah, of course, there's always things of like, admiration, right? Like, we know sometimes it can be seen as a sense of flattery, right? Like, okay, I really respect Black culture. You kind of like assimilate. We get along, not assimilate, but, we associate in that way. You're using certain rhetoric. We get along. It's a vibe. You know what I mean? Because I'm not saying this to make white people comfortable who really have been around Black people and who get it. Like, no, you know what I mean? Obviously, they're going to adopt certain verbiage or lingo or swag, quote unquote. That's fine. But I'm just saying, as far as the divvying and like the playing in Black culture, I don't like that. And I'll never like that, especially as it pertains to white women, because Black women are shunned for the very things that white women are praised for. And I don't care if you on a platform talking about the gospel, that'll never be okay for me. That will never be okay for me, because it's like, we don't get that right. We don't get that opportunity. You know what I mean? So how dare you it's like Kim Kardashian. You know what I mean? Like, so many white women take Black women's stuff. You know what I mean? Because you have to understand, Black culture is it's something that is very like sporadic, and it's like, even with like gospel, right? Like, you have the gospel originating with Black culture. You know what I mean? It was soulful. It was purposeful. It was the thing that really helped us and carried us through some really difficult times in this country. And for it to just kind of be like hijacked, and now it's like rock band, and now it's, you know what I mean? That's hurtful, because what's left is like nothing for the Black people. We don't even have Black churches anymore. Like, white people are starting these churches and making so much money so quickly and so easily. It's crazy. You know what I mean? But our churches have foreclosed, you know what I mean? Because they couldn't pay the rent, because they could never get the money to, and you can question, okay, was that due to, a lack of, resources or a lack of awareness in terms of where to get grants and so forth? No. And I think that the biggest lie in regards to racism is that Black people have never tried, and that Black people don't try. That's the biggest lie. Black churches have foreclosed and shut down all over in the ghettos and so forth. And because of gentrification, because they were bought out, because intentionally their taxes were raised to essentially move them out of the communities. You see what I'm saying? So what's really saddening for me is that we're at this place now where, especially for Black people, our reality is it's no longer, as James Baldwin once said, existing in a state of polarity in terms of like constantly being, he said, being relatively conscious and being enraged, right? I'm paraphrasing. I really could have looked up I'm gonna look up the whole thing. Hold on, y'all. I'm gonna just go ahead and put this in real quick, just because I ain't even gonna do Baldwin like that. We gotta come correct. Okay, I think I know. Yes, he said to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time. And I realized to be a Black Christian in this country is to constantly exist in a state of polarity, right? This is who I am. I feel good about me. This is who God made me to be. But at the same time, I'm existing in this space where, I'm not Black. I'm too Black. You know what I mean? I'm wrong. You know what I mean? Who I am is wrong. I'm sure there's so many white Christians who are in sex, having sex, doing all these different things that Black people are ashamed to do. And I'm not saying you should, right? I'm not saying that you should. I'm not saying you should even follow them. I'm just letting you know that, while we're all here communing, we're all having different experiences. And this diversification of communion is making some people more ashamed than others. And it's perpetuating a sense of guilt in others. And it's instilling a sense of embarrassment and humiliation in some people, whereas other people are being justified, for everything that they do. And they're still not corrected. I remember I was communing and I was worshiping, and there was this white girl that was there at the place of worship, and we had a conversation. We were waiting for worship to start, and I asked her something, and I'll never forget. She told me, she said that she don't eat fast. We were talking about something, and she said, "Oh, I didn't eat fast food growing up." Because I said I just had Wendy's for dinner. And she's like, oh, I don't eat fast food. I never had fast food. And I was like, oh, you never had fast food? She's like, no, I don't eat fast food. Like, I never had fast food. I'm like, oh, you didn't eat fast food growing up? And she was like, no, I never had fast food. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, so what'd you eat? And she's like, well, I mean, I did have Chipotle. But it was like, white people don't know how to relate to Black people, right? For her, that was nothing more than kind of just like a tactic to bring me down a couple notches. Like, you're not worthy of talking to me. You know what I mean? We're not on the same field, right? I wasn't poor. I didn't grow up eating fast food. You know what I mean? Because there's no way you can exist in the country where there's a McDonald's in every 4-mile radius and you never had fast food. Like, that's just crazy to me. You're not Amish. You know what I mean? But that's the thing with white people. Like, for so many of them, they don't know how to interact with you. When I think about criminality and I think about Black youth, it has taken prayer, but most importantly, intentionality in terms of reframing my mind in regards to Black boys, seeing them as children, ridding myself from the indoctrination that makes Black boys be perceived as aggressive, that makes me handle them in a way that I'm being aggressive. I'm being, feeling like I have to manhandle them when they're just children. That's a boy. And boys are different, right? Like, I don't need to come at this child with so much aggression, but that's what society, right? That's what representation, negative representation anyway, will do to you. And so with white people, that's the thing that's never questioned, even in faith. As a matter of fact, in faith, it's just justified, right? It's justified. And what scriptures are white people really reading? Because, you can't possibly ignore the oppression of somebody in the Bible. What side do you identify with, And that's the other thing that brings me back to my point, too, about justification, right? White people aren't even reading the Bible. They're not even reading it. You go to these mega churches, they got all these quotes and presentations from Thomas Jefferson and, Bill Gates. They got one line in the Bible for you. And it ain't making no sense. It ain't in no way, shape, or, nothing. In no way is there any correlation to the sermon, to the motivational message, nothing. It's just all nothing more than a platform, because everybody wants a platform. And I just think there's something sinister that happens when you have a person who has historically enslaved you and, they get a platform, right? They take from you and they get the platform. And then they're the ones who have to come and preach them. Like, I don't know, right? I think that Black people, and, obviously it's different, right? Like, this is, like I said, we're not going to speak in generalizations, but for Black people, the Black experience is one of oppression. It's one of deprivation. It's one of trial and strife and triumph, and it's continuous, right? It's survival. And I think what that affords us, because, it's not really glitter and rainbows, right? But the beauty in our struggle is that it does birth creativity, right? Because creativity is typically, it's something that is cultivated where there is lack, right? You have to get creative with what you have and the utensils that you have, right? We know that. That's the whole origination of creativity. But, when you talk about the Black struggle, it births something in you. Like that continuous pressure, that continuous, you know what I mean? Like, and obviously it's not always something beautiful, and that's rightfully so, but it's something about the character strengthening. It's something about the faith even being tested to see how, you could be in a space where you don't have gas money and you don't have food on the table and you don't have the resources that you need, but somehow the resources show up. Right? Somehow when you're praying in your car and you're crying at night and, it shows up. So I don't need white people teaching me about faith. I don't need anybody assimilating and teaching me about faith. I don't need nobody telling me, how I should be, how I should act, because it's very evident to me that this is only for certain amount of people. This is only for a certain type of person. You know what I mean? But other people ain't having these problems. We're not on the same playing field with this. So I'm going to end there because I kind of feel like this was all over the place, but I know for a fact you got something from this. And, my prayer is that, you would just open your eyes to the world. You know what I mean? My prayer is that you would dream with your eyes wide open. My prayer is that, you would have a heart. You know what I mean? Have a heart towards God in terms of like being good towards people. And, my prayer is that you will use your platform and your life to serve those who are around you in terms of like, blessing other people, That's the thing. And so you got to open your eyes. You got to wake up. You know what I mean? It's time for you to live and to figure out who God is for yourself. It's through experience that we're able to even have a testimony, right? Like you talk about testimony, that's what it is. You're young right now. You haven't been through enough. You haven't seen enough, and it's okay. And neither have I, right? I don't know everything, That's why I say, don't make an idol out of me. I'm not the girl with all the answers. Okay. But what you have to understand is that you're not ready for that level of authority. When you put God's name on something, we talk about Christ and Christianity, you're not ready for that. You haven't been through enough for that, and you have to understand that for most white people, this is nothing more than a cash grab opportunity. These Christian brands, they making way more money than the black people would ever make, you know what I mean, doing certain things and selling certain Christian t-shirts. And so often it isn't even until black people start to assimilate in white spaces, with Christianity being kind of like the comforter, right, that they're able to even get the resources to build the businesses and do the type of things that they want to do. And even still, there's no acknowledgement whatsoever about the world today. I think when you start talking about activism, when you start talking about justice, first of all, I'm going to tell you all the time, Jesus cares about justice. But most importantly, you have to understand we got enough people with their eyes closed. We got enough people with their eyes wide shut to the woes and to the sadness and to the harsh realities of life. If you really want to come to Christ, you're going to have to be a truth seeker. You're going to have to be someone who's mature in the faith to realize like this is life. This is what it is. You know what I mean? Make it out of this. Figure out who God is. Hit the road. You know what I mean? Get up the road and figure out who God is. Let him show you on your journey. Let him show you through your trials and tribulations and your experiences. But don't just sit, idly. You know what I mean? Not living life, not experiencing life for yourself. And then look up and be so angry at God, for your life. And that's a message to me. You know what I mean? I think about all that I've sacrificed in the name of like religion, feeling like, oh, this was bad. That was filthy. That was from Satan. You know what I mean? Having that type of paranoia, quite frankly. You think everything is bad. It's like God can't even bring anything to you. And this is not a fault of your own, but this is the reality, right? You wonder why you have so much fear. It's because you think that everything in this life is bad. You think everything in this life is bad. And then you see the Christians who out here, they got what you want. And you're thinking that they got it by doing the perfect things and living the perfect life. And they haven't, and I just think that the message that people sell you in terms of like a perfect life and a perfect, it's not real, and the reason why it's not real is because so much of it is rooted in the righteousness of the white. And you're never going to be that. You're never going to meet that standard. Like I said, white people can go out and, make Christian content and, like it's popping, it's hot. They're using certain lingo and it's dope and it's all these different things. If a black person does it, it's defiling. It's blasphemous. It's all these different things, So understand that first and foremost. Like I'm not here for it. I'm really not. And I see right through it, quite frankly. And I am really tired of it's like I said, it's not even the people who appreciate black culture, who've been around black people who can, you know what I mean? Obviously they have certain lingo. They got a certain swag about them. Okay, that's fine. But I'm talking about people who just genuinely play in our face and play in our culture. I don't like it. And especially when you start doing it in the name of Christ, I don't like it. Because when you sit with these white people on the one-to-one and you really get to know them, like for real, so many of them are deeply, deeply racist. Like they don't even like black people. They cannot stand black women, most importantly. Okay? That's another thing. They can't stand a black woman. You know what I mean? They may be able to get along with a black man, but they can't stand a black woman. And that, to me, that's very, very alarming, especially when you start putting Christ's name on something. And I'm going to end with this. In the words of James Cone, okay? Christianity has always been about the liberation of those who are oppressed. And anybody who is not on board with that, anybody who is not here for liberating the oppressed, is doing the work of Antichrist. Okay, and I'm paraphrasing, but have a good night.